Hi, I'm Shelley Wood and this is my tiny sewing room where I make doll clothes sewing videos. Today I'm going to show you how to make a long sleeved shirt that will fit 8-inch baby dolls like the Li'l Cutesies. And Li'l Cutesies are from JC Toys, and they are a fabulous little doll. This shirt goes great with my overalls pattern, which, like the shirt pattern, is also free on my website. So, before we begin, please go to my website, shelleywood.com, to download and print this free PDF sewing pattern. There's a link below this video on YouTube. It should make it easy for you to find. Cut out all the pieces you see here for the outer layer of the shirt. So this is going to have a lining. I'm using a silky polyester for my outer layer, but cotton would be easier to sew, and it works just as well. Cut out the same pieces for your lining, so they're identical pieces. I'm using a contrasting color for your benefit. Lay a sleeve lining on top of a sleeve outer layer, keeping your right sides together if you have fabric where it matters. Sew across the bottom of the sleeve. Open up your sleeve like you see here. Press the seam open with a hot iron. Follow these directions for both of your sleeves. Measure your doll's wrist for elastic. Cut your elastic to fit the doll's wrist. Attach a safety pin to one end of the elastic. Fold your sleeves so that the right sides are out, and sew a casing stitch wide enough for elastic above the hemline of the sleeve, in other words, above where you folded it. Send your elastic through the casing and pin it in place with straight pins. So I'm going to show you a quick video clip in case you need a little guidance in how to do a casing. So I send my safety pin through, and when I get toward the end of my elastic, then I push a safety pin through the elastic. You have to go all the way through the elastic and back out. Remove the safety pin when you get to the end, but hold your elastic in place and then put another straight pin through. Here's a view of my sleeve from the wrong side. And what you're going to do is sew a little stitch at either end of this casing to hold the elastic in place while you're working with the sleeve. Keep those stitches close to the fabric's edge. Once that's done, it's safe to remove your straight pins. Follow these directions for both of your sleeves. Lay one bodice back on top of another bodice back, keeping right sides together if you're using fabric where it matters. Now notice, one is an outer garment piece and the other one is a lining garment piece. Sew around the neck, the back closure area, and the bottom of the back. Follow these directions for both of your backs. Clip the seams and corners. And that's what you're seeing me doing here. I have some little tiny snippers that I absolutely love. And I remember being younger and finding it difficult to do this clipping. And it's because I didn't own these little snippers, which make it easier to not cross over your own stitches. Invert the backs. A chopstick can help you gently poke out the corners. Now, I insert my thumbs and then I give that chopstick a little twist in the corners, and that gently pokes out the corners. Press all seams. Now, because the bodice front has an arc to it, this pattern cannot be cut on the fold. Usually I do have you cut my bodices on the fold. So what you do is lay one of your bodice fronts on top of another, keeping right sides together, again if you have fabric where it matters, and sew along this front angled seam from the neckline to the bottom of the shirt. Clip the very center of this seam and press. Lay one of the front linings on top of the other lining. Again, keep right sides together if you're using fabric where it matters, and once again sew along that front center line. Clip it at the angles center, open up the bodice lining and press. Lay the lining on top of the outer garment front, keeping right sides together so your seams are on the outside. Sew along the neckline. Now I like to start my stitches in the middle and then sew out toward the shoulders, and what this does, it helps to keep the center seams aligned. Now clip and invert, and again I'm using my little snippers. You know, if you'd like to purchase some, my website has a link and I get a little commission if you buy it through my website. Now you're going to invert it, and it's a little easier to invert than you might think. At first it might kind of twist, but we will press it so that that doesn't bother us too much. So press your neckline seam. Okay, now lay one back piece on top of the front piece. Again, keeping those right sides together. So you want to make sure the fabric that's going to show when the doll wears it is on the inside. Stitch across the shoulder area. I do this by hand for a good reason, and it's going to make you laugh. Sewing machines tend to devour these little sections. Okay, follow the same directions to attach the other back piece to the front. So just like you see me doing here, and then right there where I'm pinching them together, I'm going to sew it. Just like I did before, and there you see it. Open the garment up like you see here, and press those shoulder seams open. Now, I happen to have used polyester, which frays a lot. So I did a bit of a top stitching to my shoulder seams, but you don't have to do that. That's really just optional. If you're using cotton, it won't fray as much. Lay one of your sleeves against the back as shown and sew them together from the underarm, just like you see here, to just shy of the shoulder seam. And by just shy, I mean that I stop sewing a 1/2 inch or 1.5 centimeters from that shoulder seam. Now wrap the sleeve around to the front's underarm, which is what you see me doing here. I'm going to wrap that unfinished sleeve around to the underarm for the front part of the bodice, and sew again from the underarm area to just shy of that shoulder seam. There will be a big gap at the shoulder, and that's what you want. You can see me illustrating it here. I'm sticking my fingers in there. Now gather this gap at the top of the sleeve and pin that shoulder seam. Do not knot your thread until you're sure it will fit the shoulder seam. You need to make sure there's no gap there. So to make sure you can do this, I'm going to do it for you. I want to show you how I do it, okay? So here's my gap, and then you can see I've sewn the front piece and the back piece to the sleeve, but the part that I'm sewing now was left unsewn to the bodice. So what I'm doing is just a gather stitch right there at the top of the sleeve. I think that's called the cap of the sleeve. And I'm just gonna keep gathering it until I get to where my stitches are. Now I'm going to pin it, and then I'm going to give it a tug and straighten it out, and then I pin it, and maybe I need a little bit of a tug on the gather thread, and then I pin it. I might tug it one more time before I'm done. So once you're sure that sleeve fits, then you can knot and cut the gather thread. Stitch the gathered sleeve to the shoulder. I'm using a back stitch for this, and there's a link to my back stitch tutorial in the description below, so if you'd like to use a back stitch you can. So now you can see I have fully attached that gathered sleeve top to the bodice. And that's what you want, no more gap, okay? You want to make sure that you've finished stitching it all the way to the shoulder. Now attach the other sleeve exactly the same way, so you might want to go back through the video. Your garment now looks like this on the wrong side and like this on the right side. Fold one sleeve in half with the wrong side out. Okay, so you start looking at the right side, you fold it in half, and now for that particular sleeve you can see the wrong side. Stitch from the bottom of the sleeve where the elastic is, down the length of the sleeve, across the underarm, and then part way down the bodice, but you don't want to finish sewing it all the way down. Tie a knot about halfway down the bodice's side. Follow the same directions for the other side of your bodice, and now both sleeves are closed off, but the bodice's side seams are unfinished. Fold the bottom of the front lining and the bottom of the front outer fabric toward the inside area that lies between them. Okay, that can be confusing, so I'm going to flip it around to the front, and that doesn't have any kind of a hem on it. So I'm going to take the front and fold it in, the lining and fold it in, and bring those two folds together. And then you just kind of hold them in place like this, and you're going to stitch them. Hopefully that makes it a little easier to understand. Pinch these folded edges together and whip stitch along the edge of the bodice front. This will close off the raw edge at the bottom of the bodice front. If you can do a ladder stitch, which I'm not very good at, that's even better. But a whip stitch is perfectly fine too. I've never had someone complain. Once you close off the bottom of the front, your front will look like this. And the back of your garment still looks like this. Now close off the sides that we left open by finishing the seams we did earlier on both sides of the garment. Clip the underarms on both sides. And it's kind of hard to see, so I'm going to give you a little video so you can see I really did clip those. This just gives a little bit more flexibility when you put the garment on your doll. It's a little more flexible in the underarm zone. Not so crampy. Again, those snippers are so fantastic. Invert the shirt. And that's what I'm doing here. We're getting close to done. You're starting to see the final product. Look how cute it is. Add a few Dritz size 2/0 snaps down the back. If you need a little help sewing snaps on fabric, I do have a tutorial for that. Just look in the description below this video on YouTube. And now you're ready to try the shirt on a doll. For more free printable sewing patterns for making doll clothes that will fit dolls of many shapes and all different sizes, please remember to visit my website, shelleywood.com.
What if there was an easy way to take a big doll pattern and resize it to fit a little doll, or vice versa? I'm Shelley Wood, the doll clothing designer, and in my pattern alteration class, I'm going to share with you my resizing formula.
Pattern alteration is when you take a pattern that you already own and you make changes to it. Let's say a dress doesn't fit your doll quite right. I'll show you how to create a gusset to extend the dress's bodice. Along the same lines, I'll show you how to use a doll's body measurements to lengthen and shorten shirt sleeves, and to recreate the pants patterns you already own so they will fit dolls of different shapes and sizes. Following my instructions, you'll learn how to reshape dresses and skirts, making them fuller or less full depending on the look you're going for. With this collection of more than 40 videos, you'll use my measurement guide and dozens of tips and tricks to create a full wardrobe for the doll or dolls of your choice.
I invite you to join me. We are going to have so much fun.